guys, don't put diesel in your car. If your car doesn't take diesel, oh no, really?
And with that, I believe we are live. Welcome, everybody, to another episode. Welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules show. I am your head of the programming, your moderator, Lev Polyakov. It is a great pleasure to be here with the great and powerful Saturnalia Sundown. Haven't seen him in a while. And brand new to the BTR experience, we got Spoctor, the lizard man, in honor of who I have a lizard man right over here. Look at him. Isn't he nice? But
Hey.
anyway, before we get started talking about internet culture, identities, avatars, all that good stuff, everybody who's watching this right now, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit the bell. The bell is extremely important. The bell, it's what keeps BTR growing, and I would really appreciate it. Anyway, without further ado, let me ask, for all those who don't know anything about Spoctor, give us the skinny on who this lizard man is, what this... I mean, I know that you create a lot of content based around internet culture. You did a recent amazing video about virtual reality and the loneliness that people have been experiencing since the pandemic going into it. But just give us a little bit of an intro as far as why it is you do what you do and what you're really passionate about doing. And let's go from there. And then I'm going to turn
Okay.
to Saturnalia.
Okay. Well, so my I guess my starting or my rise as a creator started when I was freaking was it 16? Really early on. I'm only 21. I've been doing this for 6 years, and uh I've grown a lot with my channel. I've come to find what I do and don't like making. And the main purpose behind starting the channel was really to kind of quench this longing or loneliness that I had throughout my preteens. I was a very lonely person. I was going through a very dark phase in my life, so I was just like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna make a." Oh, am I allowed to curse? Do I curse? Can
Of
I curse?
course,
This thing?
it's absolutely
Okay,
fine. Don't worry about it.
all right. Yeah, I said, fuck it. I'm gonna make a YouTube channel, and for like maybe 3 years of that period of my life, YouTube is kind of what gave me my purpose, and it kept me going day to day, gave me something to look forward to, day in, day out. Um, and then, as I started climbing out of that mental hole, I started to kind of blossom more and really learn how to be social and talk to people. And I slowly divulged away from being this internet centered individual to actually going out, especially once I got into college, going out and meeting people. And that's kind of when a lot of my personality shifted, like drastically into more like pulling yourself away from the internet, focusing more on like yourself and like the world around you, and just kind of understanding like the bonds between humans that a lot of people don't get when they're on the internet.
And
That's
Saturnalia
kind of
would...
what I've been
Yeah.
trying to focus on lately with my content.
Well, Saturnalia, do you resonate with Spoctor's story here? Do you come from a similar kind
I
of background?
kind of actually. I do resonate with your background. I watched some of the videos that you put out, and I thought that was pretty interesting, and in a good way. Sorry, I phrased that a little
Oh,
weird.
yeah.
Um,
Thank you.
I as part of my sort of a paranoid forays into internet culture, I think that a lot can be revealed by checking out the way that these economies of attention function in social media and VR, as you put your video out that way.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I think that some of the stuff that you touched on is basically the preeminent issue of our time, with like the
Really.
merger of internet and real life. You said that you have been focusing more on real life
Hmm.
lately. I might contend that as time goes on, there's less and less of a difference between the two. But
Absolutely,
yeah,
actually.
VR, very interesting frontier.
VR is a actually perfect example of that, especially during COVID.
So when Saturnalia, you say that the internet and real life are not really being that different today, I'm curious if you could take a look at it. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. I was just recently reading the Ted Kaczynski conversation about over socialization. And Spoctor, do you know who Ted
Sure.
Kaczynski is?
That is a very familiar name. I'm gonna need to have a memory jog on who that is, though.
So Ted Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, was this guy who was
Oh,
experimented on by Harvard University back in the day with
yes.
their MK Ultra program, and then he went crazy. Although he'll say we're the crazy ones, but anyway, he went crazy, built a log cabin, and started sending out bombs to various technologists, professors having something to do with technology, with the whole point of being the raising of awareness of how dangerous our current situation is with us being so embedded within technology. And he talked about how people are over socialized today, and that also comes with the sense of low self-esteem and all that. Like, I know, Saturnalia, could you speak a little bit about that? Again, this may not be exactly your way of looking at the world, but I'm sure this is something that does come up. This is something that came up for me recently, so let me know if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure, of course. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to call myself, a disciple of Ted Kaczynski, but
Oh man, I was right
certainly,
on the money, right, Spoctor?
Oh my lord.
but certainly, I think that his critique of the enmeshing of technological utility with social utility was like incredibly prescient. I forget which years he exactly wrote. I believe it was in the mid '90s. I mean, he, in many ways, I think, predicted the the desperation with which a lot of people cling to their technology. Like you can see a lot of people who, separating them from their technology would be like separating them from their whole lives. And Ted Kaczynski obviously thought that was deeply unhealthy. I kind of think that there's no real way to avoid that with the proliferation of technology that we've seen. So I don't know. What do you want to know about? He was part of MK Ultra, which is very interesting.
That's an interesting subject in and of itself. What I'd be more interested in, though, is this idea of over-socialization, where we can contrast, on one hand, a lot of the people that Spoctor has experiences with and has been in the world of for a long time, people who are primarily online, primarily using avatars, as well as being in VR chat, like Spoctor did that great video about, versus people who are, I guess, they'll be called normies for the sake of this conversation, people who are just living their lives, going to their jobs, but at the same time are also kind of infected by this tendency to over socialize, while on the other hand, the people who are online, a lot of the problems that Spoctor, you pointed out, was that they are under socialized to a certain degree, where, like, even though they have a lot of these people online, they don't have as much physical human relationships, and that does take a slow and steady toll on them. So, Spoctor, before you expand on this a bit more, Saturnalia, I'd be curious about your thoughts on that difference
Yeah.
between those two.
I mean, you're saying there's a difference between people who are for lack of a better word, extremely online and normies, right? Who are less enmeshed in the system. I kind of think that doesn't exist. I think that in the current year, there's no such thing as a normie. I think that look, everyone out on the street, at least in America and the Western world, you go out. Like, find me a person who isn't on Instagram or Facebook, or find me a person who's never watched a YouTube video. Like, it's impossible. So,
well, that is kind of my point too. I understand what you're saying. That's my point in terms of the people who are the normies. They've also been succumbing to this kind of social media experience, but in a different way, I think. I'm not sure. Is there a different way? Like, I understand what you're saying, but I still see a difference between them
I don't
and...
think it's a different way. I think it's a matter of degrees. Certainly the people who are, the deepest into it, people who, live their whole lives in like an MMO or VR chat, or people who are in, 10,000 Discord servers are, they experience it more harshly. I would say that there are, hyper-socialization effects of that. I think that you can see a lot of people who become like pathologically enmeshed in online culture. People who, more than getting a lot of stuff out of online, they start throwing away stuff in their real lives. People who have not just found something online, but have replaced stuff in their real life with online culture. So yeah, I think that definitely exists.
Well,
Yeah,
Spoctor,
okay.
you were talking about in that VR video with your friend who was that blue metal lizard man. Kind of
Nari,
actually,
yes, that
yeah,
was his
kind
name.
of similar, by the way, to this guy. Now that I think about it, also metal and blue. But anyway, he was talking about how he lives with his step parents, and or he lives like in an
It's foster care.
foster
So
care.
they're
Yes.
yeah,
So in
they're
his
not actually
situation,
his parents at all. They're just kind of like government mandated guardians.
oh man, like yeah, like in that situation, it really does suck because it's hard to get any kind of socialization with people who are your kin, who you have some kind of a ancestry history with of some sort, have
Hmm.
something in common. So I could understand going to the VR scape from there. But from the experiences that you've had with a lot of people, do you see that as being normally the case as far as people just not having a good role model at all? Or do you see there being a disconnect with people even who have pretty like stable white bread American families?
Um, Normally, so actually, this is actually a good question. I can actually answer this one pretty solidly. A lot of the people who I find that cling to the internet on a more like in a more like serious way are people who have had very unstable upbringings in their childhood life. So people who have not had good parental figures, people who haven't had solid friendships throughout like the entirety of their life, people who just have been like controlled or just given like a lemon basically by God or whatever, by whatever figure you believe in. They tend to resort to the internet as a way to kind of be themselves in a world around them where it the world doesn't let them.
That's interesting. I mean, the being themselves part is kind of the core of this discussion that I wanted to get into, and I figure we might as well get into it right now. So, the question of identity, we were talking about this in private as well. At what point does a person become themselves as opposed to becoming the end result of all the sensory inputs they've received when they were little? Like, for example, there are people who, like yourself included, you're into dragons. That must have come around from lizards. That must have come around from a certain point in your childhood. And then there are people who take a lot of this stuff and it does become their entire world, as well as like I think the biggest example would be Chris Chan, who we had a great stream with Saturnalia talking
Oh
about Chris
no.
Chan, and yeah, so yes, and Elizabeth
Oh man, that
Janke.
sounds fun. I'll have to watch that.
But Chris Chan, I think, is the primary example of somebody whose tastes were created by the internet and the television set, where he was constantly speaking in Family Guy lingo and various hackney terms that his father must have said. It was difficult to say how much of Chris Chan was like the fully formed individual Chris Chan as much as just like a collection of different memes. So in a way, maybe that's why Chris Chan is so popular, that he just became this carrying cell for all these different memes and references and things that people can grab onto. But I don't know, like the thing that I'm sensing is that way more people have become to a certain extent like that. Not to as much as Chris Chan, obviously, but still the identity that people end up forming, at least the one that they present to the world, ends up being a conglomeration of all of these different things. And where the over socialization that Ted Kaczynski may come in here is to how much are so many of these people, some of whom may be watching the show right now, bound to all of these things. Like, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that to get us started.
Well, oh, sorry. Were you gonna go?
Oh no, I was gonna say that like when we discussed in private last time, you mentioned how the internet summed it up kind of like a hive mind in a way. It was kind of something you relayed to me, and the question of like when is somebody really themselves or independent? I think the internet is very fantastic at bringing people together. It's just one of those things that just remotely has this innate ability to do very well because it just connects people through a wire and you can talk to almost anyone at your fingertips. But it also if people who are on it too much don't seem to get that break. They can't really seem to step back and just kind of like live in their own mind for a bit and like just think about the room they're in or like what's going on around them and make their own thoughts versus getting fed something that from some thread that they've subscribed to. It's just all connected like a bunch of people intertwined together. It's a great thing, but it's also like a very strange thing.
Well, Saturnalia, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly. I mean, the whole idea of people being an agglomeration of their experiences is not new. I mean, you could go back all through history, and people would be, you could be some medieval peasant. You'd be an agglomeration of all the things that you had seen that had happened to you. But the thing that's important to understand about the internet's effect on this is that it's this great intensifier, right? You can have information delivered to you so quickly and in such niche respects. Like you could be a 5-year-old and you get interested in something and you can have an endless stream of that ever more extreme or even crazy versions of it delivered to you at will, right? So this is a cybernetic concept. Philosophically, it's a cybernetic concept that these information delivery mechanisms can form feedback loops, right? So you have an input, that being that you're interested in any topic, say like Chris Chan interested in Sonic the Hedgehog, and then because of his initial input on that interest, he gets fed back ever more strange ever more strange and intense factors from that. So I mean, Chris Chan is I would say probably like the ultimate bad, and like he's the most pathological version of this, and I don't think it's necessarily always bad. I think that there's a lot of people who have probably become like a good scientist or something, or
So
become.
You're saying it's kind of like accelerated because of the internet, like because of how
exactly
quickly.
Yeah.
Well, it's also kind of like a snake, or since Spoctor is here, a lizard eating its own tail. Where if you think about it, Chris's final conquest of his love quest had to do with his mother, which is in a way a snake eating its own tail. It is Chris coming back to where he came from, in a way. So in a way, it's the ultimate
Poetic.
It's like the kangaroo going into its own pouch. It's just it all
Poetic
reverts.
Novel about Christian.
It's all.
It was foreshadowed from the beginning.
Exactly. It all reverts back. I'm going to wait until this alarm is over. It all reverts back into the black hole of nothingness. It's kind of like a microcosm of the entire process of the universe being created and then imploded back into itself. But anyway, as far as most people, though, who are not like Chris Chan, there was a video that you recently did, which I know that you rescinded that video, Spoctor, the one about the TikTok, like the trends that are going on.
Identity disorder. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I mostly took that one down because of some conversations I had regarding. It wasn't really the things that I said. It was more so the fact that I was showing off a bunch of kids on TikTok and just kind of leaving them out in the open. I thought about that for a long time, and I was like, I'm not really proud of that, so I did end up taking the video down. But I still do agree with a good portion of what I said in the video.
Well, I'm curious, for those who did not see the video, can you give us a bit of a refresher on what exactly was the specific point of the video, what you were trying to find out here, and what conclusions you drew from it?
The main point I was trying to make with the video, and I think some people lost that through the translation of it because they were so heated by some of the things that I said that were kind of nuanced. But the main point of it was to kind of like learn yourself instead of listening to a lot of what is put out there. Like, since it's like the topic of mental health, I wanted to encourage people to actually go to like a professional and figure out maybe like if you think you have a mental disorder, like talk to like somebody who would probably know what you have. And like self-diagnosis is a thing. It happens. People can look at stuff, they'll figure out and they think, oh, I might have this, I might have that. But in the end, they still can be wrong because the information they're using to get their own self-diagnosis could be from sources that are also misunderstood or like incorrect. And so you can go to a therapist, and they know the field, they've studied the field for years, and they can help you out and kind of like guide you and show you what you might have or what you might not have. So you're not trying to treat something that isn't really what you need, or you're not trying to use a treatment that doesn't treat the thing that you have.
Well, as far as the experiences that the kids have, I do agree that, like for the sake of the privacy of the kids or just not putting them into a vulnerable corner, I think that is fair to not have that kind of exposure. But the theme itself, I think, is an extremely important one for those same kids and for other potential kids who may be in that situation. Because if you have people, like you said, who are not diagnosing this in a professional way, it's almost like they're on their own, and they're also part of that loop that Saturnalia was talking about, where they're constantly getting reinforcement of whatever it is that they already kind of wanted to believe. As far as I understand, that's the way the TikTok works, right? Like, you just keep seeing everything that's related to what you're already believing, kind of the reason why we have such a big political divide, too. But I don't know. Yeah, like, I don't know, as far as just these mental conditions, and again, I don't want to single anybody out or say anything about any specific condition, but I have noticed that there has been online in this conversation about identities a overindulgence in a way of expressing what it is about you that's wrong, what it is about you that's faulty, and finding other people who also have that being faulty inside of themselves as they perceive it. It feels like that is the wrong way to go about these things. It feels like it's just like all this, to recall the great Joanna Quinn, it's all a depression quest. Like it's all just going downhill.
Like what I said at the end of my video, I said, and this was one of the biggest things I said, and it's be wary about framing your mental disorder on a wall. You might not want to take it down. It's like you want to be a healthy individual. Obviously, that's everyone's end goal. But if you're bonding with people because of the fact that you're broken, when are you going to decide to stand up and fix yourself?
Why do you guys think that is? Like, Spoctor, why do you think that instead of highlighting positive things, people highlight the negatives?
Because this roots to like a much more like individual based question. Like, it'd be easier to answer this if I were to talk to somebody again. But from a lot of the interviews that I did, a lot of these people just tend to do it because they don't really know what else to do. It gives them validation, especially when something probably maybe is wrong with them, but they don't know how to fix it. So they just talk to people who have that problem, that similar problem, kind of like therapy, but then they kind of dive too deep into it.
Saturnalia, I know there was some sound happening in the background there, but Saturnalia, I know that one very interesting thing about you, and guys, look up Saturnalia Sundown's Twitter account as well. It is in the description of the video.
Maybe I'll post again on it one day.
Please do. Please do. But one very interesting thing that you like to do is going down the rabbit hole of certain, let's say, corporate as well as intelligence interests in the internet. You were talking about this one person who was in charge of Encyclopedia Dramatica, linking them to an intel agency, I believe, or the U.S. Air Force or something like that.
Well, that's a girl Vinyl who founded Encyclopedia Dramatica. She was a U.S. Department of Energy intelligence officer with Q clearance, which is like pretty high. That's pretty high. And I just found that really, really interesting, given the later, sort of adaptation of the tactics used on.
The dog is barking. One moment.
That's that dog's been programmed to bark whenever that name is uttered. The stream's gonna shut down
for the
now.
Government.
Exactly. But
I basically just found it really interesting that these sort of online protest tactics, like you saw on Operation Chanology back in 2007, which were coordinated by a lot of people who were heavily involved in ED. would go on to basically be co-opted by elements of the U.S. government for stuff like the Arab Spring or regime change in foreign nations, which I just found extremely interesting. I'm not saying there's any hard evidence of that, but
Someone in chat said sunk cost, which is actually an interesting perspective as well.
What exactly is it? It says over here, and it was
the sunk cost fallacy is you've been working on a project for like a year, and then you realize like 70% into the project that the entire thing is just like, shoot, it's not going to solve the problem that I need, but you just finish it anyway because you've sunk so much time into it.
And you see that a lot in gambling and finance.
Yeah,
that is true. And what would you say is the closest thing that it relates to as far as the online lives of people and the identity that they form? Is it just like the amount of time they spend forming that identity?
Yeah, like when you're trying to reach out and find new people, and you relate to them and bond with them on one specific topic, and then maybe that's like the one thing that you end up bonding with them with and meeting other people by, and then by that point you've kind of sunk yourself into this group that all knows you for that one thing, and so you just kind of wing with it because, I mean, you're getting friends that way.
That is a tough situation to be in, and especially if there are some other influences that are playing a role here as far as the stuff Saturnalia was talking about. How easy is it to mold people in the future? Like Saturnalia, I don't know how much you want to go down this road, but I find it to be a pretty interesting one as far as the amount of power that governments, intelligence agencies, how much power would they have to psyop an entire generation of Zoomers into acting in a particular way versus how much of it is organic, at least as organic as the internet can possibly be?
Oh, I mean, I think quite a bit. I don't want to sound too paranoid. I'm not saying that, TikTok, bipolar disorder, TikTok is some sort of government psyop. I don't think it is. But certainly, I mean, you can look at the algorithm that drives interaction on TikTok, right? And it's pretty well known that the algorithm that the TikTok, the company, provides is quite a bit different in America and the rest of the Western world than the one that they use in China, right? I was just seeing I think actually a Muslim cleric talking about that on Twitter last night. So if you look at what TikTok promotes in China, it's all very like sort of nationalistic stuff. It's like promoting, Chinese businesses, Chinese, public works projects, Chinese citizens doing stuff that the Chinese government wants them to do, which is, their idea of good citizenship. And I'm not saying there's anything necessarily incredibly sinister about that, but when you look at what's, promoted in America, and they have, the dials to change what it is, it's all, dancing, sort of frivolous stuff. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's a necessarily incredibly, calculated or sinister move to degrade the Western world or something. But I think that if you have the levers of power in what's promoted on social media, then you can change the way people think pretty easily.
Yeah, probably a lot easier than changing the desires of a cat, because I hear the cat in the background meowing. It seems like the cats are way more in control than we human beings are at this point. They are only distracted by a ball of string or a nice box. They're not distracted by social media, so maybe the cats are going to be the ones that'll rule the world after we all succumb to the social media addiction, and maybe that's why the Egyptians were right. But anyway, there we go. No,
I had to pick her up. Now she's happy.
Oh, that's nice. What's her name, by the way?
This is Glory.
Glory. Well, nice to meet you, Glory. I'm sure I'll see you when you get your webcam back on later on. But as far as the tendencies of people to attribute certain malicious government actors to molding the way that people talk, I guess the more conspiracy-minded people would say that a lot of this is a ploy to weaken Western civilization, to make men more, more effeminate, to make them, less ready for war, less conscious of preserving civilization. So it's all just like, they talk about stuff in the water, like what was that famous Alex Jones, like they're turning the frogs gay, like with the atrazine in the water.
Atrazine and glyphosate in the water. Yeah.
Now, that is actually something that was the case. Although it did not turn the frogs gay, what it did is it made male frogs into female frogs.
It altered their endocrine profile. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so that is something that's already been proven. But again, that is not something that you would... Have you known about this, Spoctor, or is this the first time you heard this?
I know the meme. I know like the clip that has been shared across the internet.
Yeah,
but,
him jumping around.
I didn't really know the
frog.
science or the legitimacy of it.
Yeah, so there we go. It is pretty legit. But again, just because you have something like that does not mean that it's maliciously intended. Because if you just have a lot of this chemical that's being made for, what was it? It was a fertilizer, right?
It's a fertilizer. And yeah, I don't think it's, done necessarily on purpose, but I do think it's malicious in that basically for decades, the USDA has known that using this stuff as fertilizer is very bad for living creatures' endocrine profiles, but they continued to allow it to be used through much of, the crop growing land in America.
But even then, the question is, are they allowing it just because they're cheap fucks and they want to save money for them and their friends? Or,
yes.
Like that. See, there we go. That's something that I would tell more of the conspiracy-minded people to consider. Not everything has to be a plan by the New World Order to put everybody in the pods and have them eat the bugs. Although, by the way, Spoctor being a lizard man, bug eating, not the worst choice, right?
No, I don't eat bugs. I don't think I'm not one of those.
Okay, that's a different tier of lizards. Gotcha.
Yeah. More like real lizard.
But still, as far as certain malicious attempts that people talk about, like I said before, it's the weakening of any kind of understanding of there being something larger than yourself. That's been the credo of a lot of people who are reacting to a lot of things they're seeing today, calling the society that we're living in. I'm sure you guys have both heard the term clown world. I mean, now it's kind of hackneyed, but the idea is that people aren't being able to grab onto anything that has any substance in it, where everything is just done for sense gratification. And in a way, like a lot of those people who you're talking about who are left in the lurch without anybody to grab onto, without any family member to look up to, if they're just stuck with all of these different signals that are telling them this and that, even if right now I could say, well, it's just making money, it's not a matter of TikTok, making it so that people are a bunch of zombies intentionally. Let's say Occam's razor, it's more like this is the kind of content that if in China they wouldn't enforce the great inventor does some invention or student aces their math exam or whatever, if they didn't enforce that kind of stuff being on the TikTok, it would probably devolve into the lowest common denominator shit that Saturnalia was saying is on TikToks in America, right? Like, I don't see there...
exactly. I mean, I think it's more of a matter of, China, in this specific case, China specifically avoiding what they view as probably the bad consequences of their algorithm while they let it, run wild here. Yeah.
And we have a comment, by the way, from D. Suero, who says, and by the way, guys, if you want to help the stream out, sneed those super chats. I'm going to really appreciate it, as well as subscribe and click the bell and add a like and all that. Oh, and Sophia's here. Nice. So D. Suero says, I'm going to come out and say this. I've used the internet as a kind of surrogate father or wise old man because while my father is physically there, he is mentally and logically absent. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that your father is physically unable or like mentally unable to take care of you, or if it's just like one of those things where he's a boomer and you're just not really connecting with whatever whatever he's talking about, because that could have so many different meanings, right? It really depends on I don't know. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Diaz Huero or not, but and Gino Whirl is saying, what's happening, just signed in, LOL. We're breaking the conditioning.
That name. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, exactly. That's what happened.
Came from my channel. I actually know them. They're in my streams a lot.
Oh, hell yeah. That's awesome. But yeah, I'm trying to understand this need that people have for the internet in the context of not just today and the next year, but in the context of like the next 10 or God, like the next 100 years. Because if the snake eating its own tail algorithm thing is going on, like Saturnalia was talking about, I'm going to have to dim the light over here. The sun is shining on me. It's giving me all this energy. But anyway, if that is going to happen within 100 years more so, this tendency for people to just seek out whatever it is that they wanted to seek out, if you're starting as like a toddler, because a lot of parents just give the iPads to the toddlers to make them shut up, and the toddlers sit there watching the worst content in the history of the universe. And if that's the next generation right now that's growing up, I'm not going to attribute any maliciousness, from any of the federal agencies or anything like that. I'm just going to say, working as it's working right now, this algorithm, how is that future going to look like for those people? How are those people even going to act like human beings if they're going to be in that kind of state from the very start?
It's all about the parenting, man. Like you said, the parents that just give their children iPads, or the parents that neglect or try to control. I think that's really what determines how well a child can be raised and how well they can develop their own identity. And if their parents don't raise them well, or they're raised in a bad spot, then they end up divulging to the internet to escape, and then that's where they end up slipping. Sometimes they climb out, but sometimes they also slip. It's like a 50-50.
Could we make an educated guess here? How many parents are like that? How many parents are the ones that don't really care, we'll just let the kids do whatever? So they would be the equivalent of the parents who back in the 70s just let their kids run around the neighborhood with whatever kids they happen to befriend there, and the parents live their own life, live their own life, if you know what I mean, and the kids live theirs. So how much of like the entire civilized world has that going on versus like the caring, doting parents that keep the iPads away from the kids, or at least severely limit the amount of screen time that the kids get? Because knowing that, I think, will help us determine what kind of world we're going to be living in and what we're going to have to prepare ourselves for in the years to come.
I mean, nowadays, I think it's just so hard to live. You gotta work constantly.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah. Go on.
Well, I think that you're going to see this actually like break down. You're going to see like a bifurcation of culture actually on class lines. So if you look at who are the people giving their kids, raising their kids on the iPad, unfortunately, a lot of the times I think it's parents who are like lower middle class and stuff like that. People who are not inordinately wealthy, that they have the time to spend a lot of time with their kids. And if you look at a lot of like Silicon Valley tech CEOs and stuff, like I think Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg have both said this, they don't allow their kids to have smartphones. Like the people who have designed the system maybe understand it a lot better than people who are living in it, right? So I think you're going to see a lot of kids of the very wealthy who have been specifically trained and modeled to work without it.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, but do you think that those kids are going to be the equivalent of possible, I don't know, Jankies? Or maybe that's me being too extreme here.
Dude, I think they'll be like Elizabeth Janky.
Elizabeth Janky, exactly. Like some.
I mean, I'm sure some of them will.
The reason why I'm bringing that up though is because on one hand, like I said before, you have people who get to be even more extremely online. On the other hand, you have people who present themselves as being professionals, while at the same time, like you said, they still succumb to being part of that world. But now you could say they're in this world kind of like the Archons, the controllers.
Like the Archons.
Exactly.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I think that they're... I mean, look, there's 7 billion people on the planet. I think that, with the penetration of internet media, I think it's inevitable that you get some, really, really terrible consequences from that stuff, and have some Elizabeth Jankies get created. I think what's interesting is that just in the next few years, we're going to see people we're going to see people who oh Jesus, I completely forgot what I was saying. Oh wait, there we go. We're going to see people who have never been without the technology, right? We're going to see people who were raised literally from the time they were 1 year old on an iPad. And I mean, I'm 25, and I did not begin, using a computer, heavily until I was maybe 6 or 7, right?
And yeah.
And so I'm very interested to see what's going to look like when you give, a literal infant an iPad from the time they're a baby. And I don't think anyone knows. I don't think
That's
fully seen
already
that,
that's
or
already
maybe
been
not yet.
happening. Like I remember I was at a barbecue one time, and the daughter of a friend there, she was looking at the not the worst thing in the world. She was looking, I believe, at How to Train Your Dragon just on the YouTube phone, and I noticed that as soon as it came on, her face was just like that. Like for those who don't see me right now, it's just like her face was frozen solid, and she was looking at this thing. It's almost like all the spiritual energy and all the consciousness, it just completely faded away, and it was just like this observance of whatever was going on, where at that point it feels like somebody like Rudolf Steiner, which I think, Saturnalia, you're familiar with. Spoctor, I don't think
No,
you
I
know.
surely am.
You are, or you're not?
Oh, I am. Oh, I
Yes,
know about
yes, of
Steiner.
course, you better. But anyway, Spoctor,
What?
Spoctor, you don't know Rudolf Steiner, right?
Oh God, names
Okay, so
Rudolph.
Rudolf Steiner, no relation to the deer. Rudolf Steiner, he was the founder of the Waldorf schools, which are these very prestigious schools that rich people bring their kids into. But he was a mystic. He was allegedly a clairvoyant. He was somebody who wrote a lot about what the spiritual realm was like, as well as the evolutionary process that the human goes through. So he was the one who talked a lot about how the previous incarnations of human existence were more spiritual based, where they were not as material. But anyway, Rudolf Steiner talked a lot about how it's important to give kids very simple things to play around with when they're young. So like paper dolls, or like kind of like in Toy Story 4. You remember that girl? She had that Forky or Sporky or whatever his name was?
Yes.
So that would be something that Rudolf Steiner would approve of, because it forces kids to use their own imagination and put in characteristics of life
Oh man.
into
Yeah.
something that does not have as much life on its own.
I used to play with utensils like at the restaurant table sitting with my family. I wasn't able to have a phone, so I just like you pretend the utensils were like battle warriors and they'd fight each other.
Oh man, that
I
is
know exactly what you mean.
yeah. Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's something that I think a lot of kids today don't really get to experience. And I somewhat experienced it. Like I chose like this car toy. It was like this block, like kind of like a giant Lego block with wheels. And I turned that into like a bad guy, where I just lifted the toy car up and the wheels became like hands. So I don't know. We could do that kind of stuff when we're kids, and it's way easier to accept it. And the concern here is that when kids are just given a lot of very detailed and explained stuff where everything's just spoon fed to them, their imagination suffers. And when their imagination suffers, the innovators that are supposed to come in next, the ones that are supposed to create the great new invention, take us to the stars, their imagination is not going to be as well functioning as the imagination of those who had to train that shit from the very beginning. So I don't know, Saturnalia, since you're a lot more mystically oriented, do you see what I'm talking about here? Do you see this potential
yeah.
downfall?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I mean, Rudolf Steiner, I'm kind of ambivalent about. I think there's a lot of weird stuff about him personally, but his educational thesis that it's important to have kids do a lot of like, physical stuff too, right? Like they should be like climbing trees, or like yeah, having like very like low tech adventures. I think that actually is pretty much objectively better for them than sitting them down with an iPad game.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
basically kids, I think, that are and it doesn't have to be Steiner's Waldorf stuff, but kids who are you know who get used to working on their own from a very early age, as more and more of their cohort are raised on, sort of objective iPad games. I think they're going to basically be like Superman, like being able to truly think for yourself and being able to truly, have agency is going to become a rare skill that could be very valuable.
It sounds to me when you describe a lot of the influence on people on the internet, Lev, you talk a lot about like the content that's spoon-fed to them. It seems to me like a lot of your concern kind of arises from that sort of era of the internet. Whereas I've never really been one to use the internet purely for the content that I watch. I've always been more of like a like TV media, like Netflix, like TV show kind of guy. I've always exclusively used the internet for socialization and purely socialization. So I've never really had that experience of getting that content spoon fed to me. I use the internet mostly for making interactions with people, and I find that there's a lot of beauty that the internet has when it comes to that. It allows you to connect with people you otherwise wouldn't meet and build these great friendships. That's just my experience with it. It's been a mostly healthy experience with me. There's been a few obvious, outliers, but then again, shit happens offline all the time anyway, too. But I find the internet is a very powerful tool if it's used properly. It does have a place where we are, but at the same rate, I feel like it needs to be injected into someone's life at the right time, at the right state of their life, and not used as something where it shouldn't be.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's kind of the point of BTR, where people are able to meet each other that otherwise would never meet each other in the first place and talk. The thing that I would add to that, though, is that when a lot of especially younger people are talking, as far as who the role models are, you could get really lucky and have somebody, I don't know, like yourself or Saturnalia or whatever, like you could have somebody who has already a wealth of information and experience that they could pass on. Or you could have somebody that's, I don't know, like some kind of, like a groomer or whatever, like some person who's going to take advantage of you. And especially on things like Discord, you're not going to know that much of a difference between who has malicious intent and who doesn't. What has been your experience in that part of the internet, basically seeing like how certain people are able to wield power over others? And when I mentioned before Elizabeth Janke and the whole Archon thing, just so you understand the context here, the Archons are these entities in this sect of Christianity, and it doesn't have to be just Christianity, but generally it's thought of as being in Christianity, called Gnosticism. Gnosticism means to know. Like the idea is that you gain knowledge and you get salvation through knowledge. But anyway, the Archons in the context of Gnosticism are these entities that have control over the earth. And I don't know, Saturnalia, if there's anything else to add about like what the Archons are other than that.
Sure. I mean, they're described in Nag Hammadi and stuff like that. Basically, they're spiritual gatekeepers or like spiritual jailers. In that, the most intelligent way that I've heard it expressed is that they set the boundaries. They set the basically like the bounding forces of reality. Like, why do we have color? Why do we have temperature? Why do we have 3-dimensional space and not 100-dimensional space, right? So basically they're the limiting force that basically reality is constructed within. They're the outside of physics.
And I would say a similar thing in the context of something like Discord servers or any kind of YouTube fandom, where you would have people that other people gather around and they become like the guru for all of these other people. They follow them. And so those people do set certain limits as far as what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. They end up causing their followers to what's been recently happening, raiding other YouTube channels and downvoting and just doing all kinds of malicious stuff just for the sake of appeasing the master. Like that is another thing that I've noticed, which is a very negative part of this whole experience. But what has been your experience with those kind of people, and does it at a certain point become a cult that it's very hard to grab people out of once they're so invested in a particular online personality?
For me personally, it was always sort of a like learning experience. I've never really dove in deep into a point where I couldn't crawl back out. It was always coming out and reflecting and then realizing what I shouldn't have done last time. But with a lot of the people I've interviewed, mostly young kids who, like similarly to that birdie video I made with Dice, they get kind of stuck in that loop, in that situation where there's this bad influence on them and they don't really realize it. But overall, it's more of a result of, once again, like where they came from. Because if they did grow up in a more fostering environment, then they would realize that what they were indulging in was not good for them. And because they didn't know that, or have no sense of like stability, there would be no understanding to the idea that what that person isn't good. So it's the internet plays a big hand in it, but it like we said, I think it's more so just an accelerant than anything. I think humans overall are still pretty linear. It's just on the internet they're a lot more aggressive, and they have the ability to act faster, more rapidly, and that doesn't allow people to think quick enough.
That is true. It is kind of accelerating there. But as far as the positive aspects, which I agree, like I said before, with Break the Rules, what I'm trying to hear, what you're trying to do on your own end, what are some of the conversations that end up taking place as far as what ends up bringing you together with a lot of people? Like, what are certain recurring things that reinforce the relationship that you have with people?
Like my personal life or my content creation interviews?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say whatever you consider to be the thing that makes this whole experience worthwhile, just this whole experience of being online and talking to people online, like the thing that you keep coming back for.
Oh, yeah. Well, currently, as of right now, the thing I keep coming back for is the audience. A lot of the time, my personal friends can attest to it. I talk very negatively about how I feel towards social media. I've always viewed it as sort of like a platform for myself. It's never really been something for me to use excessively, and I don't use it excessively. I use it to sometimes consume media, and that's about it. For the most part, especially recently, I haven't really used it to find new friends, although I have found a few every now and again through like VR, because I still can't put VR down. That's too much fun. But for the most part, social media for me has been more of just something that I use for a platform and something to get my voice out there. And I'm very comfortable with my personal life now, to the point where I feel like if I had no more internet, I think I would be okay.
Now, when it comes to no more internet or having some kind of another outlet for expressing yourself, Saturnalia, I keep mentioning that you're into mysticism. The reason why I keep mentioning it over and over again is because I don't just want it to be this thing that's hanging in the background that people just say, oh, Saturnalia, he's this mystic guy. And like, well, what does that mean? I don't know. But, he's got this cool avatar with Aleister Crowley and
Maybe
stuff.
I'll figure out what it means one day.
Exactly. No, but as far as what exactly the point of it is, I think that there may be certain things that people on the internet can also start discovering. For example, because there's such a thing as libgen and things of that nature, it's so easy.
Oh, you should see my PDF collection.
Oh, I'm sure it's very impressive. But it's so easy to find the best books that are ever written, as well as get recommendations for the best books that were ever written, or certain books that people didn't really consider reading until fairly recently. Some like old crusty texts that were buried by time and all of a sudden were rediscovered thanks to some very ingenious online people with too much time on their hands. Like something like that. has to lead to something. And this guy who's kind of controversial, but I want to get him on eventually, Jason Reza Giorgiani, he's this philosopher guy who says that humanity is never being. Like, he does not consider there to be any true human nature, as it were. Like, people throw around the word
becoming?
always becoming, exactly.
I've not actually read Giorgiani. I should have.
But by that, always becoming, I think that that's a very encouraging thing for a lot of the people who are in your circle, Spoctor, for a lot of the people who are watching this right now, because what it means is that this tendency for people to, let's say people who even like are in the furry community or in the scaly community or whatever, people who yearn for some kind of a transcendence of what is currently the situation that they're in right now. It may take the form of maybe putting on a fursuit right now, but for some, it may change into being able to alter one's environment. And where mysticism comes in here, for all the Christians the Christians probably already left, but the Christians are probably seething right now, thinking, Lev, why are you a Satanist? Repent right now. And I am not a Satanist, not in the traditional. Anyway, the point is that I think there is a way to be able to utilize certain things that were passed down through a long time ago in such a way as to yield certain results, which is what I think the basis of magic is. But people get a little bit turned off or a little bit weirded out, a little bit like, what is this hippie woo crap that Lev is talking about? Again, like, for the people who don't want me to repent, they're the ones who just end up tuning out because what the hell is he talking about? Which is why, Saturnalia, it is up to you right now to tie these loose ends together, buddy. Tell me how exactly the use of magic, mysticism, whatever you want to call it, what exactly can be done here? How can people utilize it in order to make the most out of this Giorgiani idea of humanity being this agent of becoming?
Well, I have not actually read Giorgiani, but I've talked about some friends in real life with this. Basically, if you track the history of, occultism or, mystic thought, it moves in waves. And you can see, there was a very big one in the 1920s in America and in Weimar Germany. There was a very big resurgence of, occultism in the 1960s, obviously with the psychedelic revolution and, the hippies. And then there was another recurrent wave of it in the 1980s and 90s in Britain with a lot of the chaos magicians and stuff. And I think that we are seeing another one of those now. And those track very closely, in my opinion, with economic downturns or other sorts of large-scale chaos going on in the world. And I think it's basically unavoidable. But basically, I think things are going to get very, very weird as larger numbers, per capita than I think ever before get exposed to what are essentially spiritual technologies of, creating
Spiritual
reality.
technologies.
Yeah, basically, there's going to be a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and there already are. And
Wait.
I don't think it's really
Are
possible.
you saying that it's like a technological induced mysticism thing?
Yeah, it is now, but I mean more like in the sense that basically like the core thesis of a lot of magic and mysticism is that reality is highly plastic. That what exists in reality.
I never told you what kind of engineer I am.
Ooh, are you a plastics engineer?
No, I'm a computational. I work with a lot of the newer information technologies. So I do work a lot with VR and artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And one of the most fascinating studies I've done was in regards to VR immersion and how humans perceive reality when placed into a virtual environment.
Oh yeah, and it changes. I mean, having your perception of reality changed through technology, having your perception specifically changed, I believe, can change, what you would describe as objective reality. I think that a lot of, like reality is mutable, and I think that human perception and human action, even if it's not necessarily directly causally linked, can change more things than you would expect in what becomes in reality.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's very fascinating.
I mean, is this something that has been proven to a certain degree, or is it just based on, I don't know, just if you have enough hearsay, if you have enough people talking about it, that at a certain point you say, well, all right, I guess it's right. Because it's so easy to say, well, I don't see this in real life. I'm not seeing anybody levitating or anybody doing something that I would consider to be quote unquote magical. Why the hell should I believe you?
That's the thing. So if you read, I don't actually like Robert Anton Wilson that much, but if you read this guy, Robert Anton Wilson, he poses that question, and he did this back in the 70s, is, okay, if human perception can change reality so drastically, why can't people fly? Why can't you, like levitate off the ground at will? And he does not answer that question. He leaves it kind of mysterious. But basically the way I see it is reality is co-authored by humans. The human mind co-authors reality with each other. And the ways that you don't have full control, right? But you can affect things in strange ways. I think you can alter probability. I think that you can't do anything physically impossible, but you can, if you can change the way that people see things, if you can change the way that, people, if you change what people believe, such as like with propaganda or something, you really can make strange outcomes in the world.
But quantum mechanics raised a lot of questions about reality as well.
You see that in stuff like a lot of like new age guys believe in quantum mysticism, which I'm actually not that big of a fan of. But definitely there's people who assert that there's a scientific basis to perceptual power, that it's acting in some sort of physical way.
Well, it's interesting that, Spoctor, you are in the world of virtual reality. The thing that I find the most fascinating, just because I'm a very visual person, when I meditate, I tend to see a lot of things. I had a really weird dream yesterday where there was like this whole, like I saw this Road to Saturnalia, I saw this Vietnam era flashback, and there was, just like people getting completely obliterated with this gas, just like melting people's faces off. And then the next part of the dream, I was eating my favorite dessert. And I was driving this car that I actually test drove today. So that was a fun experience. And I saw this girl who I haven't seen. Whoa, what happened? Everybody's gone.
Uh-oh.
Hold on. We're going to bring Saturnalia back. I don't know what happened with Saturnalia. I know the screen went a little bit screwy right now. Let me fix that right up. And by the way, while I'm fixing that up, if you guys want to support BTR, support bringing all of these different... Oh, here we go. Saturnalia is back on. Everything is fine. But let me just finish what I was saying while I have the floor. If you guys want to support BTR, bringing all these different people together who otherwise would never have a chance to speak to each other, patreon.com/breaktherules is where you go. Become a patron today. I would definitely really appreciate it. It's going to help the channel grow. There's going to be a lot of really awesome streams ahead, and I really thank you for that. And you could also get a variety of wonderful prizes. So for example, if you become a $20 patron, you're going to get these very beautiful magnets for the 20 tier reward. My father, Alexander Polyakov, he makes these magnets: maple, mahogany, ash wood, cherry. Very beautiful stuff. And if you guys are a fan of Styx Hexenhammer 666, if you become a $50 patron, you're going to get a beautiful Styx Hexenhammer dragon magnet. No, not a magnet. It's like a wooden sculpture. And for $20, if you're a fan of Styx, let me know as well. And my dad's going to make you like a smaller version of this thing as well. And if you become a $50 patron and you are not a fan of Styx or are kind of neutral with him and don't want a dragon, my dad's going to make you a custom magnet, whatever design you want. He is going to do it. Guarantee. I mean, within limits. He's not going to do like porn or anything like that.
Or let's go.
Yeah, anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe for a certain amount of money, like maybe some lizard on lizard action, but I'm not gonna. That's up to him. I'm not gonna say anything. Or maybe like an inflated lizard. Like anyway.
Oh my lord.
Yeah. By the way, that would be a great. That would be a great sales pitch to create balls that people can bounce around in the form of like inflated lizards or like inflated furries. Just like sell balls that you could just, play like a game of catch with or whatever, or like volleyball or, any other kind of ball game. You can have like an inflated mouse as a golf ball for the country club. I'm sure that the furries that make it really good in the finance world, they join the country club. Next thing you know, they're using golf balls that are painted like inflated mice, and that's what they're throwing around, as well as
I know a few handy people that can make stuff like that. That's for sure.
Yeah,
I got some friends who craft arts like that for conventions.
Yeah, I don't wanna underestimate the power of power of furries.
If we can buy a $10,000 fursuit, we can buy almost anything.
Exactly. But anyway, back to what we were talking about, Saturnalia. I know you cut out here, but we were talking about mysticism. We were talking about the idea of magic. What I wanted to ask you in relation to this is, I know what you're saying about propaganda and AI and all that, but since I was talking about the visual stuff, what's been the most intriguing for me personally with this, the dream that I was having with the melting people and seeing this. By the way, I'm not going to talk about it on there. I'll tell you later, but good things about that certain thing that I told you about earlier. Anyway. Oh, that's right. Anyway, with that being said, I've been very fascinated by the idea of there being another kind of internet, of there being like an inner internet, of there being what people refer to as
a
the
noosphere, perhaps.
Yeah, noosphere, or people can refer to it as the astral plane. The idea being that if you can, let's say, lucid dream, where you feel like when you're dreaming you're experiencing reality just like the reality that I'm experiencing right now, no different. Imagine if on top of that you can add the ability to have a conversation with people like we're having right now, or like people have in VR chat, but those were actually real people. Like, they were not figments of your imagination. These would be real people to such an extent that you would be able to, as one person who was formerly in the BTR Discord, which I'm going to post as well for all the people who like going on Discord, but one of the people there described his scenario that he experienced within the astral realm, where he was seen as a moth by this guy who was seen by him as a tree stump man. Like a little tree stump dude walking around, stumping around, if you will. And I find that to be extremely fascinating, because if he's not BSing, if that's the truth, he says that they exchanged email addresses, and when he came out of that state, like in, real life, he was able to email this guy. He remembered the email address, and the guy answered back. So,
what?
Like, if he's not BSing about that, if that is actually what happened, think of what that tells us about reality. Think of what that tells us about existence. Because if we're able to go into these realms where we meet people just like we meet them in VR chat, but it's a very flexible realm that has so much to do with what our imagination is and the thought forms that we generate, while at the same time crossing with other people's fantasies as well. I mean, that might as well be heaven. That might as well be this realm that people go to when they die, that a lot of different religions write about. Like that... Right? Like, I don't know.
It sounds super far-fetched, but then again, with how much of a grasp on science and reality humans have now, honestly, things that we're doing now were seen as impossible many years ago. So it's not the most outrageous thing.
It's kind of like training wheels, or rather the internet is kind of like training wheels for that kind of experience, I feel, because if you were just having that experience without anything to base it on, then you would just be floating in space. Like, you could create like some triangles or some weird shapes, like you'd probably do like what the machine elves do in the DMT realm. You just create a lot of this beautiful...
DMT realm?
Yeah, exactly. Have you done DMT?
I've done others, but no, not that one.
Saturnalia, have you done DMT? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
But Have you ever heard of harmine? Harmine.
I have heard of
No.
it. Can you tell me a little more?
So it's it's a chemical that is present in ayahuasca, and this is maybe fake science. I've never seen any studies done on it like post 1970s, but allegedly there was a team of scientists, I believe, associated with the
Meow.
maybe R. Gordon Wasson. I really forget, but they claimed that this chemical that is present in the drug allowed them to communicate at a distance, that they would have shared hallucinations, like a shared dream, and that they could communicate within it. So whether that's actually true or not, I have no idea. I don't think it's ever been, really tested by someone who isn't,
Ayahuasca
an
is
interested
a
party.
psychedelic, right?
But
Well, ayahuasca
Yeah.
is basically DMT, but like long form DMT, which doesn't come all at once. And the experiences
okay.
that people report when in that state is being realer than reality itself. And a lot of the experiences of people who, I guess you could say, come back after having a vision of dying is that dying is a lot like taking off a very heavy sock or a very heavy shoe, or like you've been walking in your shoes all day. That's kind of like life. You've just been walking in these shoes, and then when you finally take that shoe off, when you go off into the other world, you don't have all of this gravity. I mean, literal, we have literal gravity that's pushing down on us, and think of how much it takes for the human body to keep resisting that on a daily basis. As well as, we get back pain, we get all sorts of weird stuff. It's a constant struggle to survive, which is what nature's all about. And in a way, I think that makes us who we are. It makes us struggle. It makes us appreciate what we have, as opposed to if we're just like in this fairyland all the time, then I'm not sure if... Well, that's kind of why I bring up the internet too here, because it seems like if we are putting ourselves in communities where even if we have good interactions with people, if it becomes too much of an enclosed circle, which is what BTR is trying to kind of break, if it becomes too much of an enclosed circle where everybody's too comfortable with each other, it is kind of like being the DMT elves that are in their DMT world and they're not really being bothered by anybody. They could just spend all their time creating these psychedelic Fabergé eggs or whatever. And the point I'm getting to is, if nobody's invading your space, if there's no threat, if there's nothing you need to do to address some sense of impending doom, which for human beings
There's
has
no
always
progression.
been... Yeah, there's no progression. And for human beings, it's always been death. It's always been time. Time is the great destroyer. Time is the great equalizer. And we are constantly fighting against time. If there was no time, then there would be no reason to do anything.
Then there's no purpose.
Exactly.
I find that there's a direct correlation between people who have purpose and people who have depression, like inverse correlation.
I mean, yeah,
purpose and depression. If you don't have a purpose, you tend to become depressed.
So for people,
exactly.
for example,
That's what I meant. I've worded that terribly.
No. I definitely get what you're talking about. I think everybody else does as well. But it's like that example that people bring up of going to African tribes and talking to them about things like depression. From what I understand, I could be wrong, but from what I understand, a lot of the people who are living like in these more hunter-gatherer lifestyles, for all the problems that they have, there's no time to be depressed. Like you are constantly fighting against time, fighting against death in the literal sense of like having to fight a lion or whatever,
Yeah, it might be stressful, but it's certainly not like depressing.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always a purpose.
But would you say that something like that could be the great panacea to this entire world of people who, and I don't want to minimize their problems either. Like, I'm not saying, like you just, put yourself up by your own bootstraps. I totally understand that, like, people are in bad situations. But the question is, if the pressure was to come down on them more, and I know that's kind of bad of me to say, but if that were to happen, if there were to be more of a do or die type of situation, would you say a lot of them would just kind of snap out of whatever mindset they happen to be in without the use of any drugs?
I have found that a lot of people who I've actually had a personal friend go through this. They it was throughout high school. They were living with their father, and then they were living their day to day. They had like terrible mental problems, terrible depression and all that. And then they were the daughter of a single father, and their mother like ran off. Don't know her that well. No real relationship. And then when she was 18, well, in the middle of high school, her father had a heart attack and passed away, and she had to basically pull herself up from her bootstraps and like take care of herself and like all of her father's valuables and like try to like just put her life together. The only reason she passed school was because the entire like administration knew of her situation, and they just gave her like a passing grade and let her graduate. And like she had to like basically snap herself out of it and just kind of like pull some responsibility. And then nowadays she seems a lot happier. I've known her for like 8 years, and she seems a lot better now.
I mean, in a way, it's kind of a dangerous thought, but if that is the case, if that is like, I'm not saying for everybody, but if for most people, it is a basic case that if you deprive people of creature comforts, then so many of these things end up going away. And I don't know, that could be the other path that people go on as far as the economy, because either the economy is going to be good enough for people to live in the kind of environment they're living right now, or if things get so... It won't be. Okay, so what you're saying is then things will be dire at a certain point where even if people have Candy Crush on their phone, they're literally not going to have time to play Candy Crush or waste any time anymore. They're going to have to use their survival instincts. And at that point, they end up kind of freeing themselves from the technological trap that Ted Kaczynski was so concerned about.
I mean, kind of. I mean, I don't think it necessarily has to be, like frightening or life-threatening or something. But the modern
definitely
life,
and that was a very extreme example that I described. It was the most glaring one. But like modern life is like very poor at delivering, like a very discrete purpose for a lot of people. Yeah, definitely.
Particularly in the last like 10 or 20 years, like what you have very, maybe you have like little hope of like, starting a family, or little hope of, doing something to like really affect people, right? Like you're just going to work, you're just going to school, you might not really care about what you're doing. And there's very little guiding you or really bounding you towards stuff that is day-to-day necessary. So I think that if that were to change, not even in some sort of really frightening way, it could be good. Yeah.
I'd be interested, by the way, in hearing from some of the comments here, and I really appreciate all the people here talking in the chat. Shout out to Diasuro. Shout out to the end is the beginning is the end. Shout out to the great Sophia Speechura Light, aka Hotep Sophia, great friend of the show as always, and Gino Whirl. So I want to hear from you guys as far as where you think life is going to be taking you and the relationships that you're forming. Do you feel like you're able to repeat the same patterns that your ancestors have repeated as far as being able to survive? Or are you basically just in this concoction that a lot of people find themselves to be in, where you've got your social circle online, you've got some people that you know from real life, but you're kind of stuck in that snake eating its own tail thing at the moment? And do you want to change that? So I definitely want to open it up to the audience as well. Let me know what you guys think in the chat. And we're going to be concluding this as well pretty soon. We have a question or a comment from Diasuno here who says, "Oh, wow, an ad. I did not know that. From where the end? Also might have seen you lurk on Max Darrett's channel, whom Lev has collabed with." That is true. I really need to stop overthinking anyway, but I can't help it. Well, and I guess that is the thing that Saturnalia said, that if we have more things that we have to deal with as far as solving whatever dire straits we happen to be in, we're not going to have time to overthink. We're just going to have time to think about whatever it is that's at hand. So I don't know. The other case would be the whole living in the pod, eating the bugs type of existence where everybody's just, I know, Spoctor, if you see this potential future too, where everybody's just so strapped into the VR headset and they're being, like they have like a tube that's up their butt and like a tube that's attached to their urethral area or whatever, and they're just lying in this vat, in this pod, and that's their life. They're like the Matrix.
That's a very primal thing of what I'm envisioning. As a computational engineer, I see a lot more potential for something a lot less messy.
Messy isn't the whole point to get rid of the mess? Like, you got the tube and it gets rid of the mess.
Well, I mean, in a way. So like, there's been like recent discussions and like the sort of AI computer kind of discussion where it's like they want to explore the concept of uploading an entire human brain into a machine. And it wouldn't be like moving the brain. The person will still die, but who they are and everything they represent is basically copied into a machine. And this is only a theoretical concept, but it's something we're getting very close to, like almost cracking the key to. Just kind of like uploading consciousness into a computer, and then when we're able to kind of boot up who that person was when they lived in the real world. So basically immortality in a sense that it's a computer, but it's still not them. It's just a copy. It's like a clone. But it's a fascinating concept.
It's fascinating, but it's also very scary because that's not going to be your actual consciousness. I mean, that's the ultimate riddle. Like, what exactly is consciousness? So when you have...
Can you move the stream of consciousness is the next question after that.
Well, yeah, but we don't know what consciousness is yet, so it just seems like such a broad leap, yet people are already thinking about that. My concern there is, what if people decide to just take a shortcut and say, you know what, I don't know what consciousness is, but here's your grandmother. You know, like, we've copied all the information about her into this robot, and this is going to be your grandmother from now on. And guess what? This is also like a sex bot, so it's like your digital girlfriend. It could be your grandmother, it could be your mother, it could be your father, it could be whatever.
That's definitely
whatever you
a concern.
Want. Exactly. No, but but the point is
there's ethical questions, of course.
Yeah, exactly. But as far as people considering that to be a human being, that's the other kind of doom and gloom concern that people have of the definition of what a human being is being chipped away at. And I know, Saturnalia, if you've read or are familiar with any of these more doomer-minded prophecies as far as what humanity is going to go through. So let me know, like, if you have anything within that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you see this, there's a terrible fear of... particularly among like people who are afraid of like the Great Reset or something like that, we'll all be, basically herded into pens, be kept alive on this sort of palliative care of, virtual reality and the soy packet bug food, and basically be farmed for our, input value to this computer system. And I'm not necessarily saying that people don't want that to happen. I think that a lot of really kind of sinister people do. I'm just sort of more on the techno-skeptic side of things. And like, no offense to, you're an engineer working on this stuff. I kind of think that, modern humanity has kind of overstepped our actual technological capabilities. I think that saying that we're going to upload a human consciousness and have it, work as an AI, that's kind of like a caveman saying we're going to fly to the moon, which is not to say that, it could never happen, but, I remain skeptical as to how much that's actually going to be possible within our lifetimes.
Well, I mean, there's always room for skepticism, but mapping it out is, in my eyes, is very possible. But that's probably because of the background that I have.
Yeah.
Well, the brain could be mapped out, but the question is, what exactly is the source of the signal? Because we can, from what I understand, and I'm no brain scientist, but from what I understand, there are various electric connections between synapses. But as far as what exactly those are, we're not able to detect, from what I understand, the actual source. We're not able to detect what is the thing that is creating these images that the mind perceives. What is it that is directing our willpower and attention. Like we have different things we can look at. For example, how certain drugs, certain inebriated states cause certain reactions, cause a delay in the brain. We also have the ability to separate the brain where one side does not really perceive what the other side is perceiving. But the actual act of perceiving something, that's also a very big question within Buddhism, where I'm reading this book right now called Mastering the Steps of the Buddha or something like that. I'll give you the right title. But anyway,
Okay.
Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. That's it. And in this book, they talk a lot about being able to have these notations where you sit, you breathe, you stare, you end up feeling certain sensations and noting them down. So within 1 second, very trained people would be able to note down like 20 different sensations that they would experience just in 1 second. All right. And we barely, like the way that we are right now with the internet, we barely have an opportunity to be aware of what exactly our breath is doing or our heart is doing if we're paying attention to the screen. Right? Because the brain can only pay attention to one thing at a time. So with the Buddhists, their whole approach is, let's start paying attention to what's happening. And that's another misconception that people have about meditation. They think that meditation is just like relaxing and falling asleep or whatever. Meanwhile, it's like the opposite. In meditation, you end up paying a lot of attention to basically everything that you're experiencing, just like being aware. Like, this is what's happening right now. And from what I understand, what's supposed to happen is people go into these states that they describe as being jhanas. There's like the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, and so on and so forth. And each jhana brings different experience. So for example, there is a period called the rising and passing away, which people attribute a lot of the Kundalini experiences towards. Kundalini being like this energy that people feel in their spine going up and down and twisting all around, as well as various visual phenomena where people would be able to go into these altered, almost like psychedelic states without any use of drugs. And then people end up going into other states like the dark night of the soul, where they experience they face their shadow self. You could say they face all of their inadequacies, all of the problems that have accumulated in their life, and they're able to face them, and afterwards they go into the state of equanimity and other such states until they finally reach the state of fruition, or as it's also known, enlightenment, where you're supposed to get into this state of understanding what reality actually is and experiencing a sense of timelessness. People refer to that as samadhi. They refer to it also as all kinds of things, but it's not something that stops either. So from what I've read in the book, once you get into that state, it's not a matter of saying, well, now I'm going to drop all the exercises, I'm good, I'm enlightened. No, what ends up happening is like a repeat, like kind of like a new game plus, if you will, for all the gamers in the audience, where now you get to go through all of those cycles again. And as the book describes, people end up going through these cycles incredibly fast now. Like, you can go through all of these cycles like in one day, and it continues like day after day, like it never stops, and you're constantly growing and you're constantly becoming more aware. So the reason why I'm saying this, well, first of all, I forgot why I was saying this, but the reason why I'm saying this, if I can give a reason right now, is I think this offers people another way out of the snake eating its own tail problem that a lot of people find themselves in. And my
slowing down.
Yeah, exactly. Being able to slow down, being able to turn off the computer and utilize these skills to be able to remember what's going on. I mean, ideally, I don't know if this is possible or not, but another thing people talk about, this again, warning, this goes into woo territory, but another thing people talk about is that at a certain level, you would be able to recall your past lives. You would be able to recall various abilities that you did not know that you have. And again, this is super woo. I know that coming from your background, this is like super fringe, and I completely get it. I have not experienced...
I enjoy that kind of stuff though. I like delving into those thought processes because to me technology is a tool. That's how I develop it and that's how I see it. Um, I don't really indulge myself in it extremely. I think of it as something that's very fascinating and something that I just happen to understand very well. So it is very it is very fun to look into and develop and work with and then find and test the limits
Mm.
of what's possible with a system or what's possible in technological theory, which is why I like even if we were to test the limits of what's possible, I still think it would be very fascinating.
But
Uh,
this is probably the thing that's worth testing out when you start these exercises, that you've actually helped me remember what the initial point was,
it
which is,
was
yes,
yeah, the whole stream of consciousness into a computer thing we were talking
yes,
about.
yes, which is being able to know what the self is. Because according to the Buddhist, there is no self. The self is an illusion. And once you start figuring out that all of your five senses are just going off on their six senses rather, so they count the like the mind, like the thoughts that you have in your mind. I am not my thoughts. The thoughts are also like the separate thing that's away from me. But then the question still remains, what is this thing that is experiencing all of these different senses? Because you could say,
Hmm.
okay, the senses, they're just operating on their own. But what exactly is the experiencer of the senses? Because I'm not experiencing what you're experiencing, right? Like, there is still like the separation. So, what exactly is that? What is this entity that is experiencing this? I don't know. Like, Saturnalia, do you have any thoughts on what exactly the experiencer is?
Oh, yeah, I do. I think that, look, I don't think that the self is the brain. I think that saying that that
I
you
don't
are
think it
your
is either.
brain is a bit like saying that, your computer is the internet, right? Like, where is the internet? Is it in your GPU? Is it in your RAM? No, it's not inside your computer. It's it's a collectively perceived and imagined thing outside of all of that. And I think that the self, um, the idea that you're going to be able to replicate through technology a truly living being, a truly self-perceiving being, is not the case. It's like saying that you're going to be able to build a computer powerful enough that it is the internet itself. I don't think that's going to happen. Although maybe you're going to be able to create one that can convincingly tell people that it's self-aware. You're going to be able to create something that it has
Yes.
an algorithm or like a learning thing that it could even trick people into thinking it's self-aware, as we saw with
Yeah,
the
in my eyes,
Google engineer recently.
technology will never be like self-aware. It is always designed. But that's just kind of my scope of it and understanding of it.
But as far as what exactly is this self apart from the brain, do you agree with the Buddhists that the self is an illusion, that the self doesn't really exist, that is just
I do
some.
not. Yeah, I don't think the self is a thing. I believe it is. It is. If you could get rid of the self, you would get rid of a lot of problems a lot of humans have with mental problems. I know that for a fact. A lot of mental illnesses root from the self, um, and it roots from this idea of the self. And I it's I'm like wrapping my brain around it because there's so much around the self that's just so much to unpack. But like if you can find a way to just like let go of yourself and see like what more there is, then it's a lot easier to walk around and enjoy the life around you. You know.
Definitely. And Saturnalia, do you agree?
Oh yeah, definitely.
I don't think the self is needed because I don't think it's really a physical necessity in a way.
I mean, I guess it's not a physical necessity of something that like looks and acts like a human, but I think that
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a fragment of something outside. Let's put it that way.
That's a better way to put it. I really can't word myself too well.
By the way, the whole copying grandma or mom's personality into a sex robot, that's going to be Chris Chan's future. So once Chris Chan goes out of jail, it'll probably be around the time that the sex robots are going to be perfected. So
Oh my god.
that's going to be the, I'm not saying good future, but maybe he'll just be kept in some kind of a enclosure, just with the sex bot, and that's it. Or put on the VR goggles and just go to Quickville already. I don't know, whichever one
VR
of those.
asylum. That sounds kind of nightmarish. That sounds not good.
I mean, that could be, think about it this way, that could be like a future for prisoners, where instead of spending time and money to keep people in jail, they could just experience like this version of like a hellish existence where they'll repent for all their wrongdoing in the VR chamber.
No, put me on Rikers Island. I don't want that.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
well,
hey,
yeah.
that would make the square footage of prisons a lot easier to manage, take up less space, put more inmates in one confined space, Matrix did it.
Yes,
Matrix
exactly.
This beat.
Now, the last thing that I wanted to ask you guys, because the topic was originally identity and how people form identity and all that, going back to that for a second, what do you make out of some of the avatars that people use today? For example, I'm noticing that not only, but a good portion of people who are more, let's say, on the reactionary right, they use a combination of anime avatars and like avatars of like Greek statues, exactly. I mean, the Greek statues, that's much easier to understand. They want to pay homage to what they consider to be like the best example of like
high culture, old
culture.
culture.
Yeah, exactly. But as far as the anime stuff, especially like with the chibi eyes and all that, what do you make out of that? And also, even though this phenomenon, I think it's much less prevalent than it is today, what do you make out of My Little Pony, and why is it that specific franchise had so much of a resonance with a lot of young men?
Well, the anime avatar, I think, is easy enough to understand as well. It's a signaling that they exist outside of the social dogma of like normiedom, right? Like you see, anime avatars, and a lot of times they tend to do and say things that could be perceived as like very antisocial or very extreme or weird or perverse. And there's a signaling that goes along with the anime avatar that look, anime is a thing for, or at least it used to be for nerds. It's for weird guys in their basement with strange sexual things. And it's very interesting to me that people would choose to self-identify with that as a reaction against what they perceive as this very like sterile, very, dumbed down mainstream culture. The My Little Pony thing, I have no idea, dude.
Spoctor, were you around for that?
I am actively involved in seeing people that are into that. I mean, in the community I'm in. I've never watched it myself. I think it might just root back to, have you guys ever watched the show at all, out of curiosity?
I watched a couple episodes when it came out in 2011 when I was a kid.
Yeah. I think I only watched a clip like with that big red pony, the cowboy pony, whatever his name is, who's the friend of Applejack. But also I was very into, what's his name, Hot Diggity Demons animations. If you know the ones I'm talking about. Like he did like the My Little Pony parodies. But anyway, the
people I've asked about it who are like grown adults and like that why they like the show and stuff. Typically, it derives more along the lines of like, well, one, I mean, apparently it is a show that adults can enjoy. Similar to how SpongeBob used to be a show adults could also enjoy, while the kids are watching it. But, I trying to recall what I've been told. I think it has just something to do with sort of the sense of personality and community that it has. I think they're able to find some sort of sense of relatability with the characters, and because they're not at like super humanoid, they can build this allegory attachment to them, and they just find themselves drawn to it.
Well, a comment
'cause
over here from
like when I read George
sorry.
Orwell's Animal Farm, I found myself really liking a lot of the characters and really hating some of the others, even though they were literal caricatures of at the time living, breathing people.
Like the pigs, for instance, and
Hmm.
Jay has a comment here. Autistic culture is very prominent of internet culture, considering ASPs run the web server, hyper obsessions, lack of identity, in which cutie marks help them. So that's another interesting
That is
thing.
another thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is another
Like
thing.
when you have something, there was a great video that I saw from Millennial Thinker. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his work. He does these YouTube videos where he uses AI generated audio, so like text to audio, with these animated Wojaks. So it would be like the regular Wojak and like I don't know, like Boomer Wojak, Zoomer Wojak, and so on. And one was about actually furries. And in that one, though, the furry originally, the guy who was the furry, when he was looking at girls, first he was seeing those girls as like the regular Wojak girls, but then he saw them as like these anime girls with the big eyes, like just like in front of him, they started transforming. And one of the complaints that he had with the girls that he was meeting in real life was that there's a lot more complexity there. Why can't it be easy to understand what somebody's emotion is if they just, like in an anime, have like the blushing lines or like, do or have like the teardrop or whatever, display things in such a way that everything can be very easily understood where we're actually standing. So it's like a simplification and categorization of the world into, I guess, identities, which is what the name of this particular stream is, right? Like this
Very, very
oversimplification.
rigidly categorized or identities by like color and outward appearance too. Like all the they're very fixed personalities, right? Like how they're going to react at all times
Exactly.
based on their preliminary characterization. So that's probably comforting to them. Same thing with Christian and Sonic the Hedgehog, right? That the blue one is fast, the red one is angry and likes to fight, stuff like that.
This may be a controversial take, but do you think that this tendency is a sign of, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is it a sign of a certain amount of societal devolution, in the sense that if we're living in more of a primitive setting, we also look for certain markers to like friend, foe, like you have to have like these kind of feathers around you, and that indicates that you are like an ally, or you have to have, I mean, it's something that's common for all cultures, don't get me wrong, but is there something a little bit more, and I don't want to misuse this word, but would you say that is going further away from subtlety and into more of a kind of neo-primitivism, but online?
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean it's like oh man. Completely forgot what I was about to say, but yeah, it simplifies down the complexities of real life into something that can be more easily lumped into very rigid categories. Like, the bad guy, it has like sinister, like blue hair or something. Like I forget what the bad pony is. The good one is of course this like gleaming white, perfect creature. The fashion one wears like eyeshadow and has like purple hair, and how she's
People
going to
find
react in any
comfort
possible
in
situation.
simplicity.
Yeah.
And Jay says dash S after a sentence when being sarcastic is a good example of that. So,
that's true.
Yeah.
Eliminating the ambiguity of what you could be saying.
I think, well, yeah, I think, especially nowadays, people are striving for simplicity more than I've ever seen. It seems like people don't want to live in a too complex world, even though the world itself is going to be complex, and it is getting more complex, especially now with the internet, actually.
And
So,
and
it just
FR
roots back
says
to that.
over here, if you want to understand why the West is collapsing, read The Promethean Right, Why the Right is Losing, The Battle of Ideas. Every patriot needs to read this book. I have no idea if this has to do with Giorgiani or not, because Giorgiani's all about Prometheanism. But again, my concern with a lot of the more reactionary elements to that is they're also in a hive mind of their own, where I've experienced a lot of this, where you have people who, especially right now with the whole war in Ukraine, are on the side of, man, Lev's bringing Ukraine into this again. God damn it, some of the people are saying right now. I don't care, fuck it. The people who are on the side of reacting to a lot of these negative elements that they see in society are also on the side of Russia, which they falsely see as being this messianic figure that's going to bring back traditionalism and all that to the world, which is a farce, because Russia is like one of the least traditional places as far as divorces, as far as abortions go, as far as like all the stuff that they're dealing with there. It's total illusion that people have, which has nothing to do with reality there. But the idea is still like people long for there to be some kind of a dictatorship to fix a lot of problems and to kind of force people into acting a certain way, where they would see it, for example, like you were saying that horrible story about your friend who lost her father. Their reaction would be, well, you know what, let's make a society where everybody's always going to be on edge. So they're going to experience this similar kind of like enforced by the state need to act a certain way. The big problem, other than it just being morally degrading because of the things that people end up getting away with as far as their abuse on people goes, beyond even that, once you have a dictator that's in place, they are going to surround themselves by people who are going to reinforce whatever bullshit they want to hear. So it's not going to be an effective system for a long time. And for the people who are talking about, well, China's been effective for a long time, it's different because you have a entity in there now, Xi Jinping, who is reversing the process that was going on earlier with Deng Xiaoping, who was somebody that actually stepped back and let the people and the free markets operate to a pretty good extent, where there was a lot more freedom that people were experiencing, where people got to be a lot more self-determining. While now you have much more of this from the top down approach, which I think is only going to intensify corruption. And look, like all the executions and all the threats to people's lives that the Chinese government puts out in an attempt to stem corruption, it doesn't seem to work. You'd think that that would work, right? Like you'd think that having enough people being executed for corruption would stop corruption, but corruption is still going on. So, you know, like it's not a system that I see as working the way that a lot of the trads imagine it working. So even regardless of the moral stuff, I want to throw that in as well. But the only problem, which is again a problem that BTR has been addressing in its own way, is that they're also in a bubble, and they're usually going to speak to people who are not going to bring that side of it up. They're only going to speak to people who are going to repeat the things that they want to hear, or else you're going to be the odd man out, and you're not going to have as many friends around you because, well, why would they want to hear something that makes them feel uncomfortable? So I don't know. That's my take on the situation on the right, and on the left, I'm sure there's a similar thing. Out of curiosity, by the way, Spoctor, I know that you're apolitical as far as like how you do the show and all that, but where would you say your audience leans politically, out of curiosity?
Left. Absolutely left.
Really? And
I could say, like, I didn't even skip a beat. They lean left. I know they lean left.
Now, why would you think that is the case?
Because a large majority of my fan base is in art, animation, furry, and a lot of those communities have very like distinct parallels with the left-leaning politics.
And being like a little girl who keeps asking, "Daddy, why is the sky blue?" Why do you think that is?
It's probably because of the content that I had been making for a long time. The character that I have, it's colorful. It's chippy. I'm goofy. I talk about like topics that a lot of that community is interested in. But I try to take a more neutral standpoint. Although there is a decent mix, but overall a large chunk is on the left.
How do
And
you
that's just
define? How
based
do you
on my
define
interactions with
left?
fans.
How would you define left?
Like voting blue versus voting red. I would call that left or right in a way.
Well, what are some left values you'd say?
The current social climate, like, trans rights, the whole Black Lives Matter, the that spectrum, and then in the more economical standpoint, people who are more on a socialist end of things, versus the capitalist end of things, people who are like, screw the 1%, that I would consider those left-leaning people.
So it comes down to, well, before I go, Saturnalia, how would you define left? Would you agree with Spoctor's definition?
It's a very
I don't
broad
know. I
definition.
think one thing I do think is that the qualifications of being right or left, that were basically fixed for the last 50 years, are going to change quite a bit currently and in the next 10 or 20 years. Just like you were saying with China and Russia and stuff, the world is undergoing like a geopolitical reorientation, where the previous, economic relationships were Europe and Russia very close, trading gas for manufactured goods, and America and China trading food and coal for manufactured goods and technology. And now with the breakout of the war, you can read Zoltan Pazshar, a great financial author. He says that the world is undergoing a change from this Europe, Russia, and China, America paradigm to a truly multipolar, much more isolated world of Russia being drawn into China's economic influence, and Europe basically becoming like an ancillary vestigial organ to the American empire. Now, the consequence of that is that you have these sort of surreal realignments where you have, people who are very, very far right actually supporting, the Chinese Communist Party, or you have people who, consider themselves leftists, call themselves, socialist communists, who are, basically diehard supporters of admittedly capitalist America, right? So
Oh yeah.
Basically the true distinction going forward, I think, is not going to be left or right. It's going to be which geopolitical sphere of influence you want to fall into, and whether or not you are pro or anti-America. It's going to be the defining trait of the world.
Yeah, I'm not a political scientist. I don't know a lot. That's why I choose to be apolitical and publicly in my content.
Now, as far as what Uncle Ted Kaczynski, says about leftism, since we started with him, I might as well finish with him. And again, for the people in your audience that may not be as popular too, it's all right. I love all people. I love all the leftist people and the right people, as long as you agree not to hurt other people, not to force people to do something against their will.
Behind that.
What Ted Kaczynski says here is, we have portrayed leftism in its modern form as a phenomenon peculiar to our time and as a symptom of the disruption of the power process. But might possibly be wrong about this. Over-socialized types who try to satisfy their drive for power by imposing their morality on everyone have certainly been around for a long time. But we think that the decisive role played by feelings of inferiority, low self-esteem, powerlessness, identification with victims by people who are not themselves victims is a peculiarity of modern leftism. Identification with victims by people not themselves victims can be seen to some extent in 19th century leftism and early Christianity, but as far as we can make out symptoms of low self-esteem, etc., were not nearly so evident in these movements or any other movements as they are in modern leftism. But we are not in a position to assert confidently that no such movements have existed prior to modern leftism. This is a significant question to which historians ought to give their attention. So anyway, the point, from what I understand, that he's trying to get at here is that people who are on the left, they have a utopian notion of how the world should be, which I think is the same thing for people on the far right as well. They want to impose a certain kind of life that people should live in, but in a way I think more people on the left see it as being almost religious in the sense of wanting to flay oneself, wanting to hurt oneself for the sake of helping other people that they see as being less fortunate, which, at least to me, seems very egotistical. Like, I don't want to use that term, flippantly here, but the idea is that if you put yourself in the position where you're trying to become a hero, where you're trying to be like a Jesus Christ figure, where you say, you know what, I am going to do such a good thing for everybody else, and I'm going to be so passionate to it, and I'm going to force people to be this way because this is the right way. It feels like even if you're doing something that's depriving yourself of dignity, or whether you're saying like, oh, I am ashamed of who I am, my culture, or whatever, it feels like there is a lot of self-gratification in that action, which may look to somebody as just being an expression of, oh, look at how noble they are. They don't care at all about themselves or their, but it's been repeated throughout. Yeah, it's been repeated throughout history that it's just like the sense of wanting to grasp at any kind of recognition, any kind of gratification, where everybody else feels like you are doing the right thing. And again, I'm not excluding the far right here. I think that they are in exactly the same boat when it comes to it, just with different priorities. Their priorities would just be oriented less towards people that they see as being persecuted, historically, as being whatever. But the point is that I do believe in there being like this, what do you call it? The magnet theory. What is it, Saturnalia?
Sorry, the magnet theory. I don't know
the horseshoe theory.
The horseshoe theory. Okay.
Yes. See, because magnets are like a horseshoe. Exactly. Yeah. So in the horseshoe theory, where they end up meeting, I know people tend to besmirch that theory, but I think it is very, to quote the modern lingo, very heckin' valid to assume that anybody who thinks that they're on the right side of history and forces others to act in a certain way, especially if they get some kind of validation from doing that, that is a recipe for disaster. But the only thing to any of the left-leaning people that may be listening right now is that I would say is, I think liberty is a very good thing. I think the idea of being liberal, being somebody who is for people experimenting, figuring out different ways of doing things, different ways of existing, that there is nothing wrong with that, and that should be a healthy thing that is encouraged. I mean, that is kind of why, for all the nitpickings I may have about, well, these, like the furry community, they inflate too much, or they make their suits too colorful, and it's like, it's whatever. It's like, I don't care at the end of the day what people choose to do with the time that they have, as long as they don't hurt others. But that is also something that too many people say, while their towns end up being ruined, while education becomes neglected. I don't think that's a good position either to hold for building a civilization just by itself. Because if we're just sitting around all day and being extremely tolerant of everything that's happening, then at a certain point civilization will start to break down, right? Like, you still need to borrow something from more of a right-leaning idea. You do need to have some order. You do need to have a hierarchy of people that instill a certain amount of values in people, as opposed to just everybody doing their own thing, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a poster of Karl Popper up on your wall, Lev?
Not anymore. I got the closest thing. I got King Kai over here, who I consider to be, kind of like Karl Popper, I guess, right? It's kind of similar. Everybody loves King Kai from Dragon Ball Z. But I don't know. That's my position, at least for people who are listening this, who might want to consider, like, if you do want to do a good thing and not just doing it for the sake of appearances on TikTok or whatever, but actually want to help out, try to find out as much as you can about consequences for anything that you do. Like, I really like that quote from Thomas Sowell, somebody else whose poster I should put up if I had the opportunity to back there. Thomas Sowell says, how does that quote go? There's no ideal, there's only trade-offs. So I'm butchering that quote, but the idea is that there's always going to be a trade-off of one thing for another in any kind of scenario you want to live in. There's always going to be somebody that's going to get the raw end of the stick. Like, think of when cars came about, all the horse and buggy corporations, they had to go under. So you're going to have to trade off some bit of comfort for liberty, as well as you're going to trade off some liberty for a certain amount of comfort. And to have like this ideal notion of, well, everything's going to be completely equal, I don't see that working out either. But anyway, I have ranted too much. I want to get final thoughts from you guys. And once again, I really appreciate Spoctor for the first time being here. Spoctor,
no
you are
problem.
very, very entertaining to speak with, very inquisitive mind, and you do a lot of wonderful work on YouTube. Keep doing it. And we got Saturnalia Sundown. Always glad to have you on board, man. I hope that next time when you come with the webcam, you'll show off your beautiful pussy cat.
Whoa.
What the Oh my god, I was like half tuned in.
I've shown my cat on stream before. I think if you
Yeah,
go back and look, I showed the creature.
Our buddy Lev here put a nice pause in between the two words.
I
That
had
threw
to
me
do
off
it.
guard.
I had to do it.
That was like what the heck?
All right, so any final thoughts about the conversation, about identity, as well as anything you guys would want to plug? Now is the time.
Take care of yourself.
Saturnalia? Yeah.
Sure. And Lev, one day I'm going to talk to you about Karl Popper and how much I don't like him and the lineage of his thought. But we can leave that one for now. That's okay.
I very much look forward to that. And anything you guys would want to promote?
Just my Twitter page. You can go on there and read old stuff that I wrote. Maybe I'll write something again one day.
Yes.
I mean, all I got's my YouTube.
Everybody listen up and listen good. Follow Saturnalia Sundown on Twitter at twitter.com/ I don't need to say that, whatever. Saturnalia Sund, SUND 1 on Twitter. And follow Spoctor on Twitter at Spoctor Tech. Everybody follow Spoctor on Twitter right now. He has a beautiful thumbnail as well as the banner image there of this your lizard guy with the big neck. It seems like very rubbery neck, like you could just move it around and his dragon.
I mean, actually,
yeah.
have you ever touched a lizard neck? It's actually very much like that. You can very much move a lizard neck around like that. There's a lot of slack to it.
Interesting. I've touched a ostrich neck while it had a lot of water in it, and it felt like I was holding like a sack of water. Like it was pretty interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, that's in Aruba. If you ever go on vacation to Aruba, you could stay there and go to the ostrich farm and eat an ostrich burger. It's good stuff. And anyway,
yum.
Yes. Anyway, who's your blue friend, by the way? The blue dragon again, like you're right next to you.
Tech. That's also me.
That's
I
also
just have
you.
2 characters. Yes.
Nice. Is it like a Piccolo from Dragon Ball situation where they're like split into like there was originally one who was like a blue purple so like a blue green color?
Actually sorta in a way, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah,
I started off with just Spoctor, and then I threw Tech into the mix, and so now they're just kind of like 2 separate representations of my personality.
Yeah, maybe they could do like a like one of those fusion dances and combine into one dragon.
Oh God, what would that even look like?
Well, it would probably be blue-green. He would have like smaller spikes, but he would definitely be fatter. Speaking of which, I want to see that game Tribal Hunter. I don't play video games, but for all the furries and scalies who are watching this right now, I saw this amazing video by... Wait, Spoctor, did you have a chance to take a look at that video?
Oh no, I didn't. I should.
Oh man,
Tribal
right
Hunters,
after this stream is over. In fact, right after we conclude, if you're still here, I want to hear your reaction to it. But I guess that will be like off stream. I really want to hear that.
Yeah.
But anyway, guys,
yeah.
thank you so much for watching. Follow me on Twitter at LevPo if you're interested in all the crazy dreams that I have, where I combine like apocalyptic scenarios with eating my favorite dessert, which is like these chocolate. I dreamt of these white chocolate chips, like chips, not like chocolate chips, like chocolate chip cookies, but like chips. You know, like crispy chips that are covered in this white French like fromage creamy cheese. And this is from this Japanese company called Royce. The reason they're called Royce is because they're like the Rolls Royce of confectionery. They are amazing. Like these chips, once you eat them, it's like tasting into pure heaven. So I had a dream of those chips that I ate after I was driving the car. And then I was like exploring a cathedral and everything. It was awesome. Oh, and one last thing about the dream, I forgot. This is totally amazing. So when I wanted to meet this particular gal in that dream that I saw a little bit before, I had to go through the cathedral entrance, and there were these nuns there, and they had like a dark purple hair, and they were wearing like a dark purple uniform or something, or they had like pinkish hair, and I called them sisters. So I said like, hey sister, can you help me like get back up there? And she led the way. She led me into this quiet room, which was actually this, it wasn't a quiet, it was a dark room. She led me into a dark room, which was a movie theater. And before the movie started, there was a hologram of Will Smith that was doing some kind of, you know, like how in the beginning of a movie, they like do some, you know, advertising bullshit. That's what the Will Smith hologram was doing. And as I was leaving that room to go to another room, I basically berated the audience saying, why are you watching this stupid Will Smith hologram? And they were like, you know, I don't remember exactly what they said, but they were like, fuck you, Lev, like, why don't you leave us alone? It was a very interesting experience. So when I woke up from that dream, I was like, man, that was a good dream. You know, that was like, it had everything. So anyway, follow me on Twitter. I'm going to write more about the dreams at LevPo. I'm going to post it on Twitter as well for all of you guys who can click on stuff. And of course, if you enjoyed today's performance, subscribe to Break the Rules right now. breaktherules.tv. That's how you can just like type it in to go into YouTube. Smash the subscribe button. Smash the like button. Smash the bell. Make sure you click that bell, because that bell is extremely important to get updated of the next BTR appearances. Lev, where do you find this stuff and say this outlandish? I don't even, man. That's a comment from D. Alcero. Well, look. I can't help it. These are the dreams that I have. I don't know what I'm going to dream about. You never know. It's always a roller coaster ride. One day I'll dream about like a Will Smith hologram. The other time I'll dream about who knows what. You know, I'll dream about flying around while airplanes are falling down to the sky. I can dream about I was in the car where the previous passenger was stabbed as part of a gangland hit. There were some scissors I kept for myself. I rode through a police barrier around the FDR highway and was then in around Sheepshead Bay. That's where I used to live, which was very green and lush. I was riding through it on the back of a bicycle. I went to the old house, and I recall this girl who I know from real life. She was living further north in the building. There were oranges I was eating, looking for a new room in the basement room. There was a cave tower with a basement area just under the tower base. And then I saw a koala, and I saw a bear with a wombat, which later assumed human consciousness, and I walked with them as they launched an explosion of another side of the facility I was in. So there we go. I have dreams like that, so there we go. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Go to the Discord, by the way, right now. Join the BTR Discord for all the people who are watching this. I know some of you are on Discords already, so go to the BTR Discord. We could talk later on. I travel to farms a lot, so you can go experience me buying raw milk in the local farm on the North Fork and have those kind of great experiences. So anyway, talk to you guys soon. Have a good night.